Hello, I'm back. I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm so pleased that you've joined me again. And I also see in the chat there's quite a few of you that this is your first time. So welcome along to Whisky Me. My name is James. I'm your host for this evening. I'm going to have two fabulous guests. One for the Explorer range, which is the world whisky, and then one for the traditional, which is the Scotch whisky. And for all of you that are joining us again, I hope you've had a lovely Christmas. And I hope that you all got some wonderful whiskies. And maybe, I reckon some of you have also done a bit of a clear out of your whiskey collection. I certainly have a pile here. I hope you can hear that sound there. Those are bottles that I need to kill off to make space for this year's incoming whiskey. Please add all your comments. I love to see them coming in. So if you've got any tasting notes or any questions that you want me to ask, now is the time for you to do it. For those of you that are normally here, you'll know that we'll do a coin flip to decide who goes first. However, for you guys that have got the Scotch whisky, you'll realise that we're going to do that one second because I think it's going to be a little bit hard to do the Scotch whisky first and then go to the other one. So, yeah. Let's see if we can introduce our first guest and we'll ask where they're from. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good, James. Thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I love doing these shows, so I'm just really pleased to be here. I mean, chatting about whiskey is one of the nicest things to do, right?
Yeah, there's worse ways to make a living, right?
So please tell us where you're coming in from.
Yes, I am Mike Wheeler. Not that Mike Wheeler for any fans of Stranger Things. I am a different Mike Wheeler. But yeah, I am from Penderyn Distillery, the Welsh whiskey company.
The Welsh Whiskey
The
Company.
Welsh whiskey, for a long time, the Welsh whiskey company, now one of technically five Welsh whiskey companies, but by far the biggest one.
Yes. So I always want us to get into the whiskey as soon as possible, but I think we really do need to sort of talk about Penderyn and what's happening there. And you've already alluded to that it's a growing region. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, realistically, the growth is probably going to be limited.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to be one of the big whiskey making nations of the world, but I don't think anyone is really. I mean, whiskey is still we all know where the home of whiskey is, don't we? I think the fact that we're only in Wales and we're talked about as being a world whiskey really kind of sums it up. It's and it's a bit of a key thing for us because for a long time we were a bit of a novelty. We would go to whiskey shows across the world and people would come across and we would be very, very much outnumbered by Scottish distillers. And that's not necessarily the case anymore. Whiskey is made in a lot of nations by a few people, but Scotland is still Scotland, right? There's a reason you can still go to America and have those guys ask you if this is the Welsh Scotch.
Very good. So, yeah, let's dive in and tell us what we'll be drinking.
Right. Okay. So this is outside of the core range of Penderyn. So just as a very, very quick overview, because I know we're quite limited for time. We've been selling whiskey since 2004. Been producing since 2000. We've got a core range which you can find pretty readily. Always available. 5 whiskies in our core range. We've also got a dragon range, of which our house style is our Madeira finish. The whiskey that we've got in the glass, though, does not come from the core range. It comes from our limited edition range, which is our Icons of Wales range. And this is number 12 of the Icons of Wales. And as it would happen, I think possibly my favourite to date. I really enjoy the Icons. I go out and it's my job to talk about the whiskies. We've already talked. There's worse ways to make a living. But if you just deal with the core range, you find yourself saying the same things again and again. It's all history and so on. The Icons gives us a chance to really enjoy diving into the unusual, diving into the novelty, and talk about giving our blender Oyster a chance to express herself in slightly different ways. So Story wise, I mean, as much of the story as you need is dealt with on the information sheet that comes with the things. Story wise, Swansea was towards the end of the 18th century. It was Copperopolis. It was the epicenter of the world, or it was 50% of the world copper production was in Swansea, or copper smelting was in Swansea. Something that I didn't know, shamefully, until a couple of years ago, where right the way through all of the Welsh schooling without anybody mentioning this, that happened just down the road from me, 20 miles down the road. Now that doesn't happen anymore, obviously, but it's something we celebrate. Our Swansea distillery, which was our third distillery that we opened, is on the site of the Hafod Morfa Copper Works. It's a beautiful building. I'd absolutely recommend anyone that's in the area come along, visit, and have a little look at what we do. But that's about as much as I'm going to talk about the story, because the important thing is what's in the glass, right? And it's this is, like I said, this is our icons range. This is where Oyster gets to play a little bit. So we normally deal with sherry casks and port casks and so on. This is, if you get the official packaging, it's quite deceptively labeled as sweet red wine finish, which was a conscious decision made to keep it very simple for people to have a chance of understanding what they were going to get in the bottle, because sometimes people can feel a little bit overwhelmed by complicated whiskey packaging. Apparently, the reality is that there is a few different things at play. The driving influence for me is a finish in Italian sweet red wine casks, Recioto casks, and I apologize wholeheartedly to anybody that genuinely knows how to speak Italian for any pronunciation for shortcomings on my part, but Recioto casks. But there's also an element of Hungarian Tokaj casks as well in the mix. So there's quite a complicated mix of finishing casks. The primary casks, as with pretty much everything at Penderyn, is first and second fill bourbon casks. So you've got the regular bourbon influences, your vanillas, your citrus, and so on. But then what you get from these dessert wine casks is, in a good way, all over the place. I think I love it. I don't want a whiskey to be confused and muddled, but I do like layers of complexity, and I think this is what this whiskey gives us.
So Penderyn is obviously relatively new in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Pretty solid core range, but this series seems to be something where you guys can actually play. And
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about how something like this might come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the best way to explain it is how we do things regularly, because I think our point of difference at Penderyn, it's not just based on geography. It's we're not making Scotch in Wales. Welsh single malt whiskey was always supposed to have, and I hope does have, a character all of its own, and that character is driven by the way that we distill our spirit. So we're adhering to all of the stipulations to make single malt whiskey. So we 100% malted barley, water, yeast. We don't add anything. We don't take anything away. It's all by the books. Where we get a little bit different is, rather than a conventional pair of pot stills, we've got a very experimental, what was an experimental hybrid still, the Faraday still, the signature Penderyn still, the Faraday still, which is a combination of pot and column that produces a new make spirit to about 90% ABV. Now what that means is that you strip away a lot more of the body and a lot more of the heavier oils that you would traditionally associate with single malt whiskey. So you could talk about distillery character, and most of the times when people talk about distillery character, it's very, very flavor driven. I would say that when we talk about Penderyn's distillery character, it's very driven by the mouthfeel and the body. It's a lot lighter than you would expect a single malt whiskey to be. I never like to talk about it as being a beginner whiskey, but it certainly is a whiskey that we find people feedback to us is very approachable when they're at the beginning end of their whiskey journey, if you like. Now, besides that, we're all about using the same barrels as everybody else, really. You know, it's bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace, it's seasoned sherry casks, it's port casks. Our Madeira finish, it's a little bit unusual, I suppose, for a signature whiskey, but it's that you can find plenty of distilleries using Madeira casks. But that's our core range. That's what we do. You know, we use these traditional casks, but then we apply that Penderyn principle of this high ABV spirit and produce something that's really hopefully light and fruity and approachable. As a result of that process, it's usually very young. And I say very young, our standard expressions would normally be on the shelf 5 to 7 year old. We don't really tend to sell by the merit of age, but we have started to have an age statement stuff creep through. But yeah, when it comes to the icons editions, that's where you get the more esoteric stuff as far as we're concerned. So I already told you what the casks at play here are: Recioto casks and Tokai casks. We're independent. We're very fortunate in that our blender doesn't answer to a large sort of board of directors. In fact, she sits on the board of directors. They let her just take the cask catalogue from the cask brokers and just pick out anything she finds interesting. And we're very lucky, I guess, in that because our whiskey tends to mature quite quickly because of the high ABV, where perhaps we're at the forefront of these trends that you see. So I'd never heard of Recioto until this whiskey was talked about. I'm not a wine guy at all. Like I enjoy wine, but I'm not very knowledgeable about wine, so I don't know all the wines. And then I was like, oh, this will be interesting to talk about. And I go to the first whiskey show, and everyone, and either side of me, the guy's like, oh yeah, we've got a Recioto one coming out next year. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we've got it this year because our whiskey matures quite quickly. But yeah, it really is about letting Oyster play, and then really kind of like letting a blender do her thing. Was it always planned to be a Recioto and Tokai sort of a blend together? Probably not. It was probably a case that when she got the Recioto, that might on its own way been a bit one-dimensional or maybe a little bit dry for a special release, and then she wanted to add something that would add a slight extra level of flavor. So yeah, I'd love to work in a blending room. I don't have the talent for it, so I can't go into any more detail or from a knowledgeable perspective than that. But yeah, that's pretty much where that range comes from.
Fantastic. I think one of the long-standing themes for these live sessions is the choices that distillers make, and something that you brought up there, creating a very light spirit, tends to mean that it interacts with the casks very, very quickly, which gives you a lot of options sooner rather than later. If you were creating a fatter spirit, that might take a little longer to sort of find its equilibrium with the wood.
Yeah.
But I think you also mentioned there another choice. You have your light spirit, but also the ABV or the alcohol percentage when you actually introduce it to the cask. And you mentioned there that you actually go for a higher ABV.
Oh no, sorry. If I suggested that, I was being misleading. No, our casking strength is 63.4%.
Okay.
So very, very standard.
Yeah, okay.
And I think this is the thing that sometimes, we take people. Obviously, we do distillery tours, and people come and they see the stills, and I think a lot of people leave with that big number in their head, that 90% ABV.
Yeah.
But if we put it in a cask at 90%, we're losing half of it in the first 12 months. Really, it's not about the strength. That does lead to the spirit going a little bit further, which is great for an independent company. But really, it's more about the character of the spirit. When you, as I said, you strip away a lot of the heavier oils, you strip away a lot of the bigger flavor compounds that you would normally associate with single malt whiskey. So our new make spirit is very fresh, very light. Those people who've worked across different sectors in spirits often compare it to more like an eau de vie flavor than a classic whiskey flavor. We've actually got quite a nice point of comparison because in 2014 we added a pair of pot stills as well. So we've got a more traditional way of making whiskey on site, and that very much is a bit of a side project and special editions and so on. But you get to see the difference in those spirits. But at that higher ABV, when you get to that closer to pure alcohol, you're creating effectively a thinner spirit, and it does interact with the cask in a different way. It works as a really, really wonderful vehicle for flavour. So one of the really fun things about taking Penderyn out on the road is if we've got the portwood expression, for example. If I tell somebody, oh, this is our port finish whiskey, I hand it to them and they can smell port in the glass. Whereas with a heavier single malt whiskey, that might present as lovely richness, but they might not get that immediate hit of what they recognise as port. It's like I say, it's fun for tastings.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, it's a relatively brave thing to do to sort of start Welsh whiskey. 3 sites now, I believe, is that correct?
That is, yes. Though at full disclosure, at the moment, one of them is paused. It's silent. So the Swansea site run for all of about 11 months, I think, before we were as much a victim of the overall downturn, the global downturn in the whiskey market. And we see lots of people sort of cutting back on production when you're not backed up by sort of conglomerate financing or something. That's harder decisions have to be made. So at the moment, Swansea is silent, but Penderyn proper in the Brecon Beacons, the original site that's been there since 2000, and the Llandudno site at North is still running. But yeah, when you say about where brave to start a Welsh whiskey, I think that's a really good point, and that speaks of somebody that's worked in the trade for a long time. Because as I mentioned earlier, you can see the market now. You'll struggle to find a significant nation that's not got whiskey production, and we're not the shiny new novelty on the block anymore. There's people with far more outlandish stories of why their whiskey is different. But yeah, back in 1999 when the guys acquired the still, then it was very much seen as something bold. But this was the key, and this is why the still is so important to us, the Faraday still. When I'm sure many of you will have heard of Jim Swan. I know you, James, you will have heard of Jim Swan. He helped us a lot. We were his first independent project. As a consultant, we were his first project. From us, he went to Cavalan and then on to Amrut and so on. We were the first one, and he came to us and he said, the one golden rule that you must always follow is you should never ever try to pretend you're something you're not. You can't try to be Scotch in Wales. You have to make Welsh single malt whiskey. If you embrace that, then you'll be away. And that's exactly what they did. Now, I won't say it's been easy, and I must admit I've not been in this since the start. I've worked for about 9 years. But I know from talking to other people, there were times when it was very, very close to not continuing. But yeah, we're still here. And at the moment, even in a difficult climate, it's all kind of positive thinking for the future. We like to think that we've carved out a decent reputation now. We're very, very focused on delivering quality. And yeah, as long as the market doesn't turn down even further, we should be okay.
So with our very, very positive hats on,
Yes.
and everything gets back up and running and demand is flowing, are all 3 sites a mirror image of each other, or do they offer different things to the company?
Well, that's a very interesting question, actually. So the original site at Penderyn and Swansea are pretty much mirror images. So that was not the original plan. Swansea was originally going to be a craft site, and then the plans were changed to accommodate demand, which probably disappeared. The North Wales site, the Llandudno site, is different. It runs one single Faraday still, and in the North Wales site we produce peated whiskey. Okay. And I should say we've always had for a long time we've had a peated whiskey in our range, but it's always been peated by merit of cask finish. We buy casks from, shall I say, an unnamed Scottish distillery, of which a representative may not be that far from this tasting. The quarter casks, and then we finish the Penderyn whiskey in those to create a peated finish whiskey. We're not allowed to put Laphroaig's name on any of the branding, but obviously we can't trade on their wonderful reputation. But they're very happy and very open about the fact that they sell us casks. I think they sell a few people casks now, and it's always worked very, very well for us. But earlier this year, thinking back, when would it have been? End of August, we launched the first release from Llandudno, which is peated whiskey made in the traditional way with peated malt.
Very good. I think if any of you do visit distilleries in Scotland and you'll come across one where they might do a little bit of peated production throughout the year, if you ever take the time to talk to the production staff, they'll tell you how much they hate having to clean everything down to get it back to normal production. So I think it's very sensible that you've siloed it off into one specific.
Oh yeah, just keep it in one building. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's been fantastic. I've seen loads of comments of people that have come to visit you. So obviously we have a lot of people from England taking that short little hop over to see you there. So I'm very jealous of them, and I think I'm going to have to do the same as well, I reckon.
Always welcome.
Thank you so much for sharing this dram with us, and hopefully we'll see you again at the end of the show as well.
I will be here. Yeah, looking forward to the next dram.
Oh, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thanks, James.
No worries. Gosh, how interesting was that? Welsh whiskey. It's an interesting sort of world whiskey. What's the term? There are only a few distilleries there, but Penderyn is very much flying the flag for Welsh whiskey, and I must make my way over there. Being in Devon, I'm not that far away, so not many excuses really. Right, we're now moving on to the big one. So charge your glasses, and I hope you finished your Penderyn because you're not going to taste much after we move on to this one. So hopefully with the power of technology, we're going to introduce our next guest. Hello.
Hello, James. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here.
Right, so David, we might have slightly given it away, but could you tell us who you're representing this evening and what dram you're sharing?
So I am here representing Laphroaig. I work for Suntory Global Spirits. I am a portfolio brand ambassador for them. So basically, I talk about everything in the portfolio, but I wanted to say that just so everyone knows that Laphroaig is owned by Suntory, but also I wanted to say that because we're really proud of that, and it has some real benefits. And I'm hearing what Michael was saying, the challenges of being independent, the joys of being independent, and I get both sides of the argument, and both apply with us as well. We can't be quite as freewheeling and just making decisions on the fly and on the snap. We do have a lot of support by being part of a big multinational company. It goes both ways. But this evening is all about the Laphroaig, and it's about quite an unusual Laphroaig. It is the Elements one. I've got the actual carton from
there we go,
the real thing, if you like, rather than the pouch. So the Elements are a series that Laphroaig created to have fun, basically, to play around and see what they could tweak and change and what the results would be. But what it is very much focused on and really all about is what we can change and play around with in terms of the distillery character, in terms of what we do at the distillery before the spirit goes into a cask. So I know it's not going to be, and actually I'm quite happy and fine with this, but I would like, the only thing I have to say about oak and maturation for this to be that it is a Scotch whisky. So therefore it has spent 3 years in oak. We are Laphroaig, so predominantly everything we do is aged in ex-bourbon barrel. This is all ex-bourbon cask, but it's not about the wood. It's about the tweaks and the changes that we can do at the distillery about distillery character.
Sounds very good. So as we've touched on in previous shows, but I'll say again for everyone that's new, bourbon cask, as a rule of thumb, they tend to be generally quite complementary to the new make spirit of the distillery. Other casks, such as sherry, they're going to bring quite a lot. They're going to develop on that taste. So we're using bourbon casks here so that we can let the spirit shine. So you've already introduced that there's elements, and you've got elements 1, 2, and 3, and they're always changing things. So tell us a little bit about elements 1 and what you've been playing around with.
So of the 3 in the series, and sorry, don't let me multitask, I'll pour it on the floor and get it wrong.
That would be a crying shame.
It would be a crying shame with this whiskey. Elements 1 was the most planned in the series. It was like, oh, let's try and do this. What's going to be the first thing we play around with? Let's do this. So it has a number of great advantages, if you like. First off, as some of you will know, we have our own floor maltings at the distillery at Laphroaig. I'm going to say one of only 9 distilleries in Scotland. That figure might be up for challenge. Somebody might want to hazard a stab at which the other 8 distilleries are, but we do have our own floor maltings. We only have the capacity to malt and peat about a quarter of all the barley that we use. So usually, outside of the occasional Kirchhoff's release, we mix together the barley that we've peated and malted ourselves with the barley that comes over from the mainland. Everything is amalgamated together. The Elements 1 uses 100% our own floor malted barley. So it's a slightly unusual release because of that. So if you want to know what a Laphroaig tastes like when it's just our own peated barley, this is a way to be able to do that. Each one of the Elements series looking to play with 1 or 2 elements of the whiskey making process. And with Elements 1, what we've played with, what we're tweaking, are the size of the mash that we use and the quality of the wort that we're using. So again, some wort is the sugary liquid that we have made once we have ground the peated malted barley down into powder, into rough powder, mix it all up with hot water. It's our big bowl of sort of sweet, sugary, watery porridge that we've got. Now, you've kind of got 2.5 choices. You can sort of keep your wort agitated. You can stir it up and you can have a cloudy wort, or you don't. You allow the solids in the wort to settle to give you a clear wort. It has an influence. It has an impact on the flavors created, on where the emphasis on the flavors comes. So if you have a more cloudy wort, this places more emphasis on the smokier notes, on the phenols. If you allow the wort to become clear, you allow it to settle, you have a clear or a semi-clear, semi-cloudy wort, this allows a little more emphasis to be placed on the fruitier notes. And in particular, some of the more tropical fruit notes are just allowed to express themselves. Now, we are talking pretty subtle differences here. It is not the difference between opening a tin of tinned pineapple or mango, or putting your head in a barbecue. It's not that degree, but it is enough to be noticeable. It is enough to matter. And so in fact, what we did with Elements 1 was we produced 1 batch of cloudy wort, 1 batch in a clear wort and combined them together. So we're kind of going for the best of both worlds. But also why this was decided and why it matters and why it's part of Laphroaig is that up until 2014, we always used a cloudy wort. And from 2014 at the distillery, we've switched to using a clear to semi-clear wort. So this was a nod to the past, to Laphroaig as we used to make it, and also celebrating what we do now. So we had these two different types of wort here. The second thing that we played around with Elements 1 is the size of the mash. And again, this is paying tribute to Laphroaig, like what we used to do in the past and what we do now. So up to about 20 years ago or so-ish, roughly, approximately, bear with me, I don't know exactly when the switch was made, we always used to use like 8.5 tons of mash at a time. And so that would, come over to the fermentation vats, to the mash tuns, to the washbacks, sorry, go in, yeast be added, here we go. What we do now is an 11-ton mash, but we don't. We do it as 2 5.5-ton batches. So we put one batch into the washbacks, add yeast, fermentation just starts, we get flavors developing, and then we add the second batch. And the yeast goes crazy. It goes, what the hell have you just done to me? I've just got used to the balance in here. Yeast is a sensitive flower. Yeast, needs a bit of love. It's a bit of a hothouse orchid. You play around with it and it doesn't like it. So it retreats. It goes back, it stops fermentation, and then it settles down again. It goes, ooh, lots of sugar, lots for me to eat here, and restarts the fermentation process. But this almost like double start, the kickstart that we get here, again, helps to create more complexity in the flavors that we're creating at this stage of the process. And once again, with Elements 1, we did both. So we did a batch of 8.5 tons, like what we used to, and a batch of 11 tons, but 2 5.5 tons, as we do now, combined it all together. And then the rest of the whiskey making process is as we do normally for everyday Laphroaig production. So the standard double pot still distillation. We do take a very late cut, because one of the reasons that Laphroaig is has so much smokiness and that very distinctive Laphroaig peatiness to it, the medicinal notes, the iodine, is to do with having a long foreshot run through, because the phenols tend to come through much later in the distillation process. So if we took a more middle cut, we would miss quite a lot of that essence of the peatiness that makes Laphroaig Laphroaig. So we take quite a late cut. As with Penderyn, cask entry, 63.5% ABV. I only found this out a couple of months ago. For our refill cut, so New Make Spirit comes off the still at 69-70%. Cut it down with some water for cask entry. But when we're filling our refill casks, our second fills, that will go in at distillation strength. That goes in at 69% or so.
Fantastic. That's very, very interesting. I've heard of other distilleries as well, with that 69% being quite crucial for them. But you mentioned cuts. So I wondered if you could go into a little bit of detail for that, for some people that might not be quite sure what you're referring to there. Because we're talking about what's coming off the still now, aren't we?
Yes. So this is, once we've carried out all the fermentation, so in common with nearly every other distillery producing a single malt whiskey in Scotland, we do a double distillation. First distillation, so our distiller's beer goes into the still, we distill this. This gives us a low wine, as it's called, but basically that first distillation allows us to concentrate the strength of the alcohol, and we get what we call a low wine at about 35% ABV. That is then distilled again in the second still, in the spirit still, and this will now, what we do here is that as you start your distillation, as the spirit you're producing starts to come off the still, it's going to be very strong and very unstable and have have some not particularly desirable flavors there. It's going to have a little too much emphasis on the methanol notes rather than the ethanol, and it's all alcohol, but basically, you know, ethanol's the good alcohol we want. Methanol can give you some funky flavors, but if you've got too much methanol, your kidneys will close down, you'll go blind, and you'll die. Do not drink too much methanol. Ladies, gentlemen, this is one of the reasons why you should not try distillation at home. It's not a good idea. But so the cut is when we decide this very fiery first alcohol that comes off the still, called the heads, we let that run through. It gets recycled. But the cut is when we decide to start collecting the spirit, and when we decide to stop collecting the spirit. Because we do a late cut, that foreshot, the heads as it's also called, we allow that to run for longer than a lot of other distilleries would, but then we collect on till a little bit later than a lot of other distilleries would. And this is one of the ways that we can really help to give Laphroaig its own individuality and its own character by trying to concentrate what we're collecting in terms of flavour as being this essence of what makes Laphroaig Laphroaig. Did that sort of explain the
fantastic answer? And I think also it's something, so for me personally, I would say out of all of the whiskies of the world, Laphroaig is probably one in a blind tasting that you could pick out quite readily. And I've always asked people, I've said, you know, why is that? Because I think you have other distilleries on Islay that are heavily peated, very, very similar. However, to me, Laphroaig is very, very distinct. And I've always asked people, and I've never quite come up with an answer. And I wonder if you may have finally given me the answer I needed today.
So I think I've given you part of it.
Go on, give me some more.
I'll try and give you another part of it as well. And it ties in a bit with some of the other releases in the Elements series. So one of the reasons that the Laphroaig peatiness, that smokiness, is so distinctive, and you know, it's medicinal, it smells like TCP, it's iodine, it's briny, it's bacony, and you know, I'm using all of these words because I want you to like this whiskey. But when we are peating the barley, and because this 25% of all the barley we use, we peat ourselves, we go for a real cold smoking of the barley. So first, all the peat we use is dug on Islay, close to the distillery, and so it's very close to the coast. It's very maritime in its nature. So the raw ingredients of the peat, the vegetation that went into the peat bog 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, will be a lot of seagrasses, heather, seaweed even, but it's not particularly woody in its nature. But those more maritime elements, even a few thousand years later, when you burn that peat, it will give you different aromas and qualities compared to mainland peat. Now, a lot of mainland peat is dug in Aberdeenshire, but virtually anywhere on mainland Scotland, you know, if you go back 2,000 years, most of mainland Scotland was covered in the Caledonian forest. So the peat that was formed on the mainland is, just because of that geography, geology and history and botany, is going to be much woodier in its makeup and in its nature. It's still peat, but when you burn it, you are going to get different aromas released, different aromas going into your barley. So part of that Laphroaig character is the quality of the peat, but then when it goes into the kiln, We set fire to it. We don't want to see any flames. We tamp it all down. We want a cold smoke to come out of the kiln, rise through the perforated floor where the barley's all spread, and permeate through all the grains of barley. So, and I've got a video of me putting my hand into the kiln and the smoke rising up above it. And it's not because I'm a total idiot. It's because it is so cool. You can do it. I'm not blistering my skin. And the point here, James, is that cold smoking helps to emphasize those maritime, briny, medicinal notes that we've talked about that are there in the peat. Now, the point, also where we can slightly prove this, is that Elements 3 in the Elements series was about the peating and the smoking. And Elements, whereas, I said at the beginning, Elements 1 was planned. Elements 2 in the series, we took advantage of a situation and was very ad hoc. And Elements 3 was a cock-up, because Elements 3 was created when the kiln was left unsupervised. You may take your pick of the stories you want to believe on this. The kilnman, there was a poor orphan who was drowning in the sea just outside the distillery, so he abandoned his post and dived into the water and swam and saved the poor mite's life. Or he fell asleep. Or maybe there was which is possibly closer to the truth, there was a bit of an emergency somewhere else in the distillery and he got called away. But what it meant was that the peat caught fire. It wasn't being tamped down. So we had an accidental hot smoking of the barley. And when you are using a kiln and you're peating, also there's a lot of peat dust in the air, and if you don't clean the kiln out, and it was about the day before it was all meant to be cleaned, so even where the barley was lying, all this peat dust was like sparkling and flaming. So instead of this very cold, cool, white peat smoke passing through the barley, we had hot smoked barley. We were going to ditch it. We didn't know what to do with it, but it got kept. And then it was like, we can use that to show the difference in our peating, and how saying, this is a peated whiskey actually isn't enough. You can get so many different flavors and aromas from the quality of the peat, the temperature of the peating process, how long you allow it to happen for. And so that's a very long-winded, justification and description of how Laphroaig gets such a sort of unique character that in a blind tasting you can pick it out.
Fantastic. And we're at number 3, is that right, in the Elements range? Will we see more
in the Elements series? Yes, we've had 3.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see more in the series, or has that kind of series had its natural conclusion now?
I believe, I'm going to say this out loud, and please don't quote me on this. I believe there were certainly plans for Elements 4. Slightly, go back to what Michael was saying about, the challenges that we're facing in the whiskey world at the moment. We're not sure that it would be a great idea to do it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how far along they've gone, because if it's already produced and it's just waiting to be bottled or whatever, then we'll do it. But if it's like, what should we do next? I would be, at the moment, I have to say, I'd be a little bit surprised if there was. We're also somewhat constrained by what we can do, because it is meant to be, it is all about what we do before the spirit goes into a cask. And we've played around with the wort and with the size of the mash. Elements 2 was all about fermentation. Elements 3 is all about the quality of the peating. If there were to be a 4, I would imagine, he said, guessing and grasping at straws, it would be something to do with distillation. But I don't know.
Very good. Well, we just had a comment there of someone actually trying this alongside the 10-year-old, which I always actively encourage. I think doing side-by-sides is really good. Our brains seem to like contrast, so like trying two things together is very helpful. So I actively encourage that. And I would say I'm a fan of the series, so I do have
Yeah,
2 there. So fingers crossed for me that you do release a 4, but we'll wait and see.
I hope so. Um, on the bottles, so on the actual bottle on the back label, there is a code, and there's a series of numbers which I can never remember what they mean. I was told once, and it's like trying to solve for the the Enigma code. But Elements 1, my one, ends in TF. The one that we're all tasting today is TF, which stands for tropical fruit. You've got Elements 2 there, James,
Yeah.
which ends in ZA, I believe.
There we go.
Yep, that looks like
Yeah.
ZA to me. Phew, I got that right. So that's zesty apple, and I think it is. There's a more orchard fruit note to 2 compared to 1.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that dram with us. I'm a big fan of this distillery, and thank you so much for sort of breaking down all the different choices that you can make sort of with that new make before it goes in the cask. It's absolutely fantastic, very, very fascinating. Thanks so much. And you'll join us again at the end of the show as well?
Absolutely, I'm going nowhere.
Thank you so much. Gosh, well, Laphroaig certainly is one of those whiskies that has a cult following. If any of you are ever lucky enough to visit Islay, and you go and visit Laphroaig, one side you've got that wonderful coastal view, and then the other side of distillery, as we were discussing there, you've got all those peat bogs. And if you're lucky, you'll actually see people methodically cutting out the peat. It's been a joy to do this every time, but it's nice to start the new year and get these whiskey tastings up and running again. But let's see, with the power of technology, if we can bring our 2 guests back. Hello.
We're back.
Didn't go anywhere. Told you.
It worked.
Well, Michael, tell us a little bit about your thoughts about this powerful whiskey that we've just been trying.
Love it. So full disclosure, I mean, I've got a cupboard full of Laphroaig. It's actually my wife's favourite distillery, and I have been fortunate enough to visit on several occasions, and go back a few years, more years than I'd care to mention, because it was my 40th birthday. We did the I don't know whether they still do it, the Laphroaig Water to Whisky tour, and got sent out digging the peat in the bogs, which was lots of fun. But I must say, thank you, David, because I've never heard that thing about the cold smoking before. So every day's a school day. As far as this expression is concerned, I've never put my nose into a glass of Laphroaig and thought upside down cake. That was like before any water was added or anything. You think you know what to expect from Laphroaig, and then this dram surprised me because it was just so cakey and so lovely, and I just really, really loved it.
I'm delighted. Thank you very much.
And David, what's your thoughts on being exposed to some Welsh whiskey?
Absolutely loved it, and we've got a little hosts chat that not everyone else can see, and I did put in it one of the half an hour ago. Oh, that is delicious, and I stand by it. And I love talking about the Elements range because it's about what happens before the cask, and I spend so much time talking about casks. That's great, but the influence of the cask and the influence of what that cask has been seasoned with and how that plays out is, of course, hugely important to the flavour of our finished whiskey. And what I love about this icons, part of this icons range that Michael's talking about, is you get that cask influence. You really, that love, for me, it's that. Somebody mentioned butterscotch, and that's all over it, but that's lovely, soft, red fruit is what I'm getting on this. It's like, it's strawberries and raspberries, and it is that sweet wine influence and that red wine influence coming through on it. And it's a non-age statement whiskey. It shows you how glorious and vibrant and lively and fun whiskey can be and should be, it's packed full of flavour.
I'm very pleased you said that because I think we can sometimes get a little bit hung up on age statements. Don't get me wrong, it's really, really fabulous to have that more sort of like advanced flavour, but I ask you to not be put off by non-age statements because there is some great flavour out there for you to explore. That's my little soapbox there.
And I think we'll both support you on that soapbox. Tooth and nail.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's a bit of a tradition. It's kind of like the closing question, but I'd love to get both your thoughts on where the whiskey industry is going. And actually, you've both kind of highlighted about ownership structure and the pros and the cons. So I'd really like you to sort of, with your own hat on, sort of say what do you think's happening, where you're going, and let's try and be a bit positive. What you're looking forward to. So maybe Michael, we'll start with you if that's all right.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, in all honesty, more of the same. Assuming, I think we are going to see some of the smaller outfits are going to struggle. I hopefully will weather the storm. I know there's a couple already that haven't, but I think in general the whiskey consumer is a lot more open-minded to try new things. I mean, I'm a whiskey consumer myself. And I know that when I first became interested in whiskey, obviously the starting point was Scotch. But obviously having worked in the industry for a little while, it would be churlish of me to ever dismiss a region out of hand. I'm seeing more of that from everybody else. So when I go out to the whiskey shows, there's more and more people are open to trying new things for the sake of them being new. And I really think that that exploration into people trying new things is only going to benefit Scotch as well in the long term, because we've just heard David very eloquently talk to us about how the Elements series is an exercise in that. If everybody was just kowtowing down to tradition and just doing things one way, then we wouldn't have these fantastic whiskies cropping up for us. So as long as the consumers stay excited, and we're in a bit of a rich, we can talk about the doom and gloom all we like, but we're in a very, very rich period of information that's available to us and places we can go and buy interesting whiskies armed with as much information as we want. It's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Fantastic. Great answer. And now, David, over to you.
Yeah, so we are all in this together, and it's more interlocked than sometimes people realise. But if 90% of all the casks used in Scotland are old bourbon barrels, we need the American whiskey industry to be healthy and well and thriving. Other end of that scale, if Penderyn are buying quarter casks from Laphroaig, they need Laphroaig to be healthy and well and thriving. Whiskey consumers, drinkers don't want to go to a whiskey show that's only got 4 huge distilleries, 4 huge producers that they know all about. We need vibrant, exciting distilleries producing vibrant, exciting whiskey. We need the old boys. We need the Glenfiddichs and the Glenmorangies, the Taliskers and the Laphroaigs of this world to be rising to that challenge as well, and coming up with exciting whiskies for people to try, to challenge people, but whiskey should be a pleasure. And we need to keep producing whiskies that make people go, wow.
Oh, great. Well, thank you both so much for spending the evening with us and sharing your drams. They were both fantastic. And I'm going to wish you a lovely evening, and I'm going to close off the show. So thank you both so much.
Thanks for having me, James.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, as I always say, and I genuinely mean it, I really love doing these shows. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, and thank you for all of your comments. We love seeing them and bringing them on board. Please, if you have any questions, get in contact with us on our social media or email us. And when the next whiskies come up, if you've got a really burning question you want us to ask it, get it on the social media or before, or come and join us on the live. I'll always do my best to try and squeeze it into the conversation. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope your mouth has been pushed to its limits, I would say, with both of these whiskies, both sides of the taste spectrum. But happy January to you all, and I'll see you next month. Have a great day. Bye.